For what? Over a century, the story of global power has basically been the story of oil, right? It's fueled entire economies, it's decided wars, it's built empires. But right now, as we speak, that whole story is being completely rewritten. The old map of who holds the power, well, it's being torn up, and a brand new one is being drawn.
So that brings us to a pretty simple question, but man, the answer is more complicated than ever. Forget everything you thought you knew about OPEC sheiks and Texas oil barons. The game has totally changed, the players are new, and honestly, the rules are being made up as we go along. So let's get into it.
To really get a grip on where we are today, we first have to rewind the clock a bit. We've got to go back to the very beginning and see how oil power was first created, not in the sands of the Middle East, but right in the heart of America. And this is where it all started. Long before nations controlled oil, it was one man, John D. Rockefeller, and his company, Standard Oil, that built an absolute empire. See, he didn't just drill for oil, he mastered refining, transport, the whole shebang, creating a level of control the world had just never seen before.
Just look at that number for a second, 90%. By the 1880s, a single company controlled 9 out of every 10 barrels of refined oil in the entire United States. This set the original blueprint for oil power, absolute centralized control over the flow of energy.
Of course, a monopoly that huge can't last forever. The really crucial part is what came next. So Standard Oil gets broken up, but the power just shifts. After World War II, the US strikes this pivotal deal with Saudi Arabia, this oil for security pact. And that leads directly to the 1973 crisis, when Arab OPEC members basically turned oil into a weapon, shut off the taps, and showed the whole world just how vulnerable it was. And this right here perfectly illustrates the system that ran the world for 50 years. It was this elegant, kind of fragile loop. American military power guaranteed the security of the oil fields in the Middle East, and in return, all that oil was priced and sold exclusively in US dollars, the petrodollar. Now this is the key. It forced every other country to buy and hold US dollars just to get the oil they needed. This created this constant, massive demand for American currency, cementing its economic power for half a century. So for decades, that was the story. The US played bodyguard for the oil, and the world depended on it. But then, this technological earthquake happens, right back where it all started, in America. And it completely flipped the script.
This is the tech that changed everything. Fracking, paired with horizontal drilling, let producers get at billions of barrels of oil that were, for all intents and purposes, unreachable before, locked away in this dense shale rock. It wasn't a new discovery of oil, it was a new way to get it. And it worked on a scale that nobody, and I mean nobody, thought was possible. And the result? Well, by early 2026, U.S. oil production hit a mind-boggling 13.6 million barrels per day, or MBD as you'll see it called. All of a sudden, the world's biggest consumer became the world's biggest producer, blowing past both Saudi Arabia and Russia. This didn't just change the market, it changed geopolitics forever.
Okay, so let's jump to the present day and see how this all plays out. This new reality of American energy dominance has created this fractured, really tense global landscape. It's full of new alliances, new strategies, and even a few shadow wars playing out on the high seas. To try and counter this flood of American shale, the old guard had to team up. OPEC joined forces with other big producers, most importantly Russia, to form what we now call OPEC+. And their main weapon is coordination. By all agreeing to cut production at the same time, they try to create a bit of artificial scarcity and keep prices from crashing. But some members of this new club are fighting another battle entirely. To get around sanctions put in place after 2022, Russia has put together this so-called shadow fleet. We're talking hundreds of old, untraceable tankers that operate completely off the books, secretly moving Russian crude to buyers in China and India, keeping the Kremlin's war machine funded. So if you want to boil it all down, this is the central tug-of-war in the oil market of 2026. On one side of the rope, you've got OPEC Plus trying to pull prices up by turning down the spigots. And on the other side, you've got this surge of production from the Americas, the US, Brazil, you name it, pulling prices down by flooding the world with a surplus. And it's not just about who's producing the oil anymore. The centers of power are also shifting on the demand side. The countries that are buying the oil are becoming just as powerful as the ones selling it, and that's redrawing the entire world's energy trade routes. And no player's strategy is more fascinating or complex than China's. On one hand, it is, by a long shot, the world's hungriest oil consumer, importing something like 74% of what it needs. But at the exact same time, it's pouring more money into solar and wind than any other country, building this massive green energy machine to one day reduce that very dependency. It's a really interesting long-term hedge. And then you have India. As this chart makes pretty clear, it is now the single biggest engine of new oil demand on the entire planet. It accounts for a quarter of all global growth. What that means is India is now an absolutely critical customer for every single producer, whether you're Russia, Saudi Arabia, or the United States. Meanwhile, the supply side keeps getting more and more diverse. It's not just the US shale boom. There's a whole new wave of production coming online all across the Americas. You've got Brazil becoming a deep water powerhouse. Guyana is the world's fastest growing new producer. And Argentina is developing its own massive shale reserves. But here is the biggest plot twist of all. Just as the world is getting used to this new oil map, another massive disruption is already on the horizon. And this time, it's not about finding more oil. It's about replacing it entirely. The next chapter of Energy Power, it's not going to be about geology. It's going to be all about technology. These are the three big technologies you've got to watch. Carbon capture could let us keep using some fossil fuels, but with way fewer emissions. Green hydrogen could provide clean fuel for heavy industry. And synthetic e-fuels, well, they could replace gasoline and jet fuel in the engines we already have. Look, they're all in their early days, but they represent a fundamental challenge to oil's long reign. This quote just nails the transition we're living through. For 150 years, power meant controlling a finite resource buried deep underground. In the future, power is going to mean mastering the technology that can convert abundant things, like the sun, the wind, and water, into usable energy. So this is the new global energy balance. It's a tipping point. On one side, you have the legacy fossil fuel system. On the other, a decentralized world of clean energy. The new great power competition between the US, China, and Russia won't be fought over oil fields anymore, but over who can innovate and scale these new technologies the fastest. Which brings us right back to our final question. We've seen power shift from one company to a group of nations, then get completely upended by one tech revolution, only to face another one. So, what are we really witnessing here? Is it the end of the oil age itself, or is the game of energy dominance just getting a new name, a new set of rules, and a whole new generation of winners?